Hello. 1, 2, 1, 2. Check, check, 1, 2. Okay, here we go. Enjoyed my cup of milk coffee so much that I decided I'm going to enjoy a second cup. While I do so, it's 9:30 now here in Riga. Most things are closed until 10, so I've got 30 more minutes before heading out for my next adventure. And so I've got some time to go over my YouTube. I noticed a lot of people on the internet don't really do this, and I realized the reason why they don't do it is because this content is aggregated based on your viewing behavior. So it's a little bit confessional, I suppose. Anyway, I've got 30 minutes, so let's. I'm gonna have a look at this one first, in order of length, probably. Modern women. This type of woman will destroy you. What's that all about? Hello. Latvia is supposed to have blistering fast internet speeds. This is not blistering fast, but I am on a public, a hotel internet connection, and passing through a VPN. I think. Oh, I think I've got it on.
What's happened is the rise of social media and the rise of online dating and the rise of feminism has taught women that they are not to blame for any poor choices. Every poor choice is glamorized. So if you want to be a sex worker, it's great. If you want to post in bikini pictures online, it's fine. If you want to be in with it, every poor choice is glamorized, and every internal reflection is seen as gaslighting yourself. So they've even got terms for internal reflection to prevent it happening. And so what will happen is they are trained to not reflect on themselves because we've been told we've been oppressed for so many years. Now it's time to make sure we project. And so we don't take any accountability. And as a result, when we get into relationships, if we don't feel completely soothed all the time, he must be a narcissist. He must be a manipulator. He must be gaslighting. He, rather than I. And unfortunately, we've got an online market that caters to that wounded woman, that caters to that entitled woman, and caters to that narcissistic woman. And it's so wild to me that so many women talk about narcissism, but the society today is just catering to narcissistic women. If I post a picture online, a bikini picture online, there's nothing my husband can do that could compete with that level of accolade.
Attention.
Impossible.
The compliments,
The
the attention,
compliments,
the messaging, the you're so sexy and beautiful, and all these different things from thousands or potentially millions of men
around the world
who have money and all these things.
Yeah, and there's nothing he can do. He can't post online and get the same reaction. And more so, he can't give me the same level of validation.
Oh my God.
So what's happened is we've created a setup in society that means men have to compete with a level of validation they can't compete with.
Right.
And if they go online, if they join Tinder, that night they can have so many more options than a man can because we've got filters and we've got all of these. Again, I really am privy to this myself. I'm a filter queen. So, but the things I can do to manipulate male validation,
To get more attention from men.
just soothe myself and to remind myself I'm above this. I don't need him. I can replace him. Is something men actually can't do. So they have to rely on pornography for that.
Whoa.
They replace us with pornography and we replace them with likes and comments on social media.
Wow. That is, I had nothing to say throughout that. I was completely. The title of the video is Modern Women Are Not What You Think. This will shock you. And it did shock me. What's to say, really? What's to say? What is there to say to that? Well, okay, so all my videos have now switched and changed around. But I like the way it was before. Why are you changing it, YouTube? I had a particular order I was gonna. No. Nope. That's that now. You've clicked that. Now you're in trapped. Yeah, I think that's true. I'm not gonna lie. The most shocking part for me was realizing, yeah, I can never compete with providing the level of validation that my wife or partner or significant other, what have you, woman can get from the internet, from social media. No way. So it's like in pre-social media and pre-social web days, you'd be competing on a daily basis. I heard somewhere in a relationship the vlog or something like that, they were saying about it's okay in a relationship if you do find yourself that your eyes wander, what have you, that there's going to be competition. Like it's almost kind of healthy in your mind to do that assessment, and that your partner wins that competition if it's a fair competition. But what this woman was saying here in this video is that there is no way. There's no contest. It's a no contest between men and the attention, validation, and message and all the other messaging that women get from being on social media. Powerful. Varoufakis on Trump. Let's go. It's a long one. I picked the modern women one because I thought it was going to be light, but she just went bottom of the ocean deep with that. Coffee. Come on. In case you don't know who Yanis Varoufakis is, he's a former minister of the economy for Greece, a former professor of economics at the London School of Economics, and a writer.
Of Goldman Sachs as the Treasury Secretary. This is the modus operandi of the fascist. What they want is they want to have their cake and eat it. They want to devalue the dollar without jeopardizing the exorbitant privilege of the dollar, the reserve currency status of the dollar. Is this far-fetched? No, it's not far-fetched. He starts with the tariffs, and then in the one-on-one discussions with each of our leaders, hapless leaders, I should say, he demands different things from different people, depending on what they have to give him. Nobody is immune to the global fallout.
Yanis Varoufakis, welcome back to Politics Joe. Thank you for joining me, Ollie Dugmore, today.
I'm going to try and simplify what that little introduction was saying. Basically, the American dollar is the reserve currency of many international currencies around the world. So what that means is, like, way back in the day, governments would back their currency, their money, by gold, silver, copper. That's why the coins were like silver, copper, etc. Precious stones, jewels, things like that. Like, think about the Bank of England, the royal jewels, the mint. That was like that's what insured your money. So, and in the U.S., the greenback dollar, you could, back in the Wild West or in the olden times, you could exchange your dollars at the Federal Reserve, at the central bank, and say, I'm good with gold instead. I don't want this paper stuff. So it's kind of like money is like an IOU for the metals and stones that this currency is worth, right? The Bronze Age, the Gold Age. I don't think the historians call it the Gold Age, like the 1800s and the 1700s, but basically it was. Gold was still considered the most valuable thing on the planet for us as a civilization. So the paper money, the coins were backed by that, right? think that even in the very early days, the coin itself was its own value, right? Because it had intrinsic value. It had value in and of itself. The money, it was a coin. It was a silver coin or a gold coin. So now that none of that exists anymore. Lots of the currencies, there are currencies around the world that they insure their national money and the people that use it with US dollars, so that instead of gold, you can exchange it for dollars. Question that somebody might be wondering is, then what is the dollar backed by? Nothing is the answer. It's backed by debt. So it's backed by a promise, basically, to create more money.
Day, how would you like to introduce yourself before we get started?
A failed finance minister.
And the introduction, what Veroufakis is saying there is that the game that Trump is playing with the tariffs war is to essentially kind of like pull in the reins from the global economy and sort of like using currency and economics as a form of control. The video is called analyzes Donald Trump's tariff war, but the opening thumbnail, like you saw on my opening screen, is something about like, this is how fascists operate. Yeah, it's kind of like saying, instead of putting a gun to your head, it's like putting and saying do this. It's grabbing you by the wallet and saying do this. So, you know, for me, there's a kind of like almost kind of irony to this whole situation, because for decades now, like I'm 42 years old, so the 90s and the noughties, especially in the 90s, people used to talk. And I've lived most of my life as an expat, so I'm an American who's lived abroad, and always been and I'm kind of a provocative guy anyway. So people would talk about American imperialism, and before 9/11, post 9/11 as well. People were saying about American imperialism, and that was used to justify boycotting American products, some people boycotting American culture, and policymakers abroad justifying putting up their own tariffs and putting up their protectionist policies to keep American products, businesses, and culture, and sometimes even people with visas, etc., out. So that rhetoric, I was talking with a group of 20-year-olds yesterday, because I was curious to see what younger people think about all this stuff. At a cool place like the cultural center of Riga, really cool place. I'm gonna go back there later today, and maybe stream from there, and do an interview with some of the people. And they were talking about I've lost track of what I was saying. Get coffee in my face. Oh yeah, that was it. The question was, they said, "Oh, how did this idiot get elected?" I asked them about Donald Trump, what they thought about him. They said, "The only thing, I don't know what to think about him." They were saying they were design students, and they were like, "I don't know what to think, and all I know, I just don't know how an idiot like that got elected." That's how that idiot got elected, by people who remember the days before the internet was big, before the social media, before all the Twitters, before 9/11, before credit crunches, and it was easy for Donald Trump to turn around and say, "Oh, look," and he's still saying it now, today, even like till yesterday. He's like saying that this is us now fighting back against the protectionism that has been put up against us. And a lot of countries will not have a leg, and people will not have a leg to stand on. Because if for decades you've been talking about American imperialism, and that's justifying putting up the protectionism, now it's kind of like, oh, you want to see imperialism? Well, this is it. And that's what Veroufakis, I think, was where he's going with this, that now you're really seeing the true face of American economic imperialism. So, like, if you believe in the law of attraction, if you believe in manifestation, if you say things enough, they become true. That's how Donald Trump got elected. That's exactly how.
Of a failed state in a failing Europe. How about that?
They're not bad. I think that's a good. I think that's a good. I think that's a good way to start, and therefore making you eminently qualified to discuss what's happening right now, Yanis. So many different places to start. So much is happening. It just feels like the news becomes newsier and newsier every single day. Obviously, we're starting to see the immediate fallout of Liberation Day and the implication of the application of Trump's tariffs. Obviously, there are first order and second order consequences that are going to come way down the track. But right now, the markets are crashing. Should we be grateful in Britain? I appreciate we're speaking over Zoom that we appear to have gotten off lightly. We've only been whacked with 10% worth of tariffs.
Well, it is a small mercy, but then again, nobody is immune to the global fallout, and Britain has its own special inanities and weaknesses. You have an economy which has been, since Thatcher ravaged your manufacturing, your economy has been founded on a Ponzi scheme based primarily on the financialization of people's homes. And
yeah, let that sink in for a second.
The financialization of the whole economy through the City of London. And that is simply not a sustainable model.
No, it's not a sustainable model. Massive amount of the UK's GDP, its gross domestic product, I think something like 70% of it is services. I mean, it's only 30% of the UK's economy is actual, like, real stuff, actual products that are catering to people's wants and needs. The rest is services. And of that 70%, I think something like 40% of it is financial services. So, like, I don't know how much that comes to. I'm not good with math. 40% of 70% of something is whatever it is, but it's a whole lot of scrambled air in a jar.
Hasn't been sustainable for a while, but Donald Trump is making it absolutely clear that business cannot continue as usual in the United Kingdom, just as it cannot continue as usual in the European Union.
Isn't it that there appears to be, it might be a small part of the Venn diagram, but at least some crossover between the sort of the nationalist populists in America, led by the likes of Steve Bannon, and their economic messaging that essentially the status quo cannot continue, and that corporations have been taking advantage of and running roughshod over regular working class people in America, and some of the messaging that you would hear typically from the sort of the more socialist left here in the UK and Europe. Now, obviously, the diagnosis might be the same, but the cure and the prescription can be different. But it's been quite striking to me to see a figure on the right in the States talking about sort of the economic model in those terms.
Well, you shouldn't be surprised at all. You know, nothing is new under the sun. In the 1920s and the 1930s, the fascists and the Nazis began every single speech with a pretty clear and accurate depiction of capitalism's collapse. 20, 30 years ago, as in another lifetime, when I was still an academic and I had the luxury of time and research and all that, for a book that I was writing, I had the difficult time of reading every speech that Joseph Goebbels delivered in the 1920s, in the 20s, not the 30s, early on. And I have to tell you that they were very interesting pieces of writing. Each one of them comprised 4 pages, exactly 4 pages. The first 2 pages were an analysis of the manner in which the collapsing financialized capitalism of the 1920s was destroying the working class in Germany. And, I could have written it. It was brilliant. Until you come to the end of the second page. Remember, there are 4
humble
pages.
as always.
And then he starts continuing along the lines, taking it further by start blaming the Jew. And then the third page starts talking about the Holocaust, not so much the Holocaust, but, the preamble to this weaponized misanthropy.
Right, it's a slippery slope.
This is how fascists work. They take some basic analysis from the left, from the socialist left, and they use it in order to excite the imagination of the suffering working and middle classes, drum up support, talk about the banker and the capitalist and so on, in order to pinpoint the crux of the matter, who happens to be the Jew, or today the Muslim, or the asylum seeker,
Right.
usurp power from the discontented, and then once they're in power, what they do,
Deport them.
inevitably, is they go into bed with the banker and the capitalist that they admonish in their speeches. Exactly the same thing that Donald Trump does. He talks about draining the swamp, Wall Street, and so on and so forth. And the first thing he did in 2017 was to appoint the CEO of Goldman Sachs as the Treasury Secretary. And today he took a hedge fund manager that was working with Joe Soros, shorting the Bank of England, to put him in that same position. So, let's not be surprised. This is the modus operandi.
Watch The Big Short
fascists.
if you want to know what he means by shorting.
And previously as well, the Trump administration has been sensitive to Wall Street and the markets, and obviously the markets appear to be crashing, whether it's in Asia, America, or Europe. Do you think he's sensitive to it right now? Do you think he's and actually, I guess the more interesting question for me perhaps is, how intentional do you think this is? Is it deliberately? Is it a deliberate choice by the Trump administration?
Of course it is.
To push the markets in this way with these tariffs. Do you think it has been thought through to that extent? And I guess what I'm sort of referencing here is the Mar-a-Lago Accord, or reported Mar-a-Lago Accord.
Well, number of things that need to be unpacked from your question. The first thing to remember is that his shotgun has 2 barrels. The first barrel shot already these massive tariffs. But there is a second barrel, which he hasn't shot yet. And that contains a cartridge full of exorbitant tax cuts for fat cats. I will not be surprised, and nor should our audience be surprised, if when he shoots that second barrel, that second cartridge, the markets are going to go through another bout of irrational exuberance and triumph, recovering, and then, they'll be mates again. Look, as far as the Mar-a-Lago Accord is concerned, well, it was Stephen Miran that coined that term.
He's hinting at what he said earlier, that the kind of the blueprint model for fascists is first attack capitalism, basically first attack the left, then attack the right, and then become buddies again with the bankers for the money to finance your agenda, whatever that agenda might be, and then sort of seep in that agenda into via the wallets of the working man into their minds.
I don't believe that something's... By the way, let's unpack this for our audience. It harks back to something that happened in 1985, when Ronald Reagan was president, another Republican, who decided at some point that enough was enough. The American trade deficit, which was fine by the Republicans and the Democrats after the 1970s. This was the new business model after the end of Bretton Woods, after the United States ceased being a surplus country.
Bretton Woods is what I was talking about earlier, and he was alluding to, like the how the dollar is backed by nothing but debt. The no more gold standard.
Because in the first 2 decades after the war, America was a surplus country. They were selling us a lot more than they were buying from us. And that was the basis of the golden age of capitalism, the period of the Bretton Woods system, where we had fixed exchange rates. I mean, think about it. The pound and the dollar had the same exchange rate day in, day out, year in, year out. You had interest rates fixed at around 5%, year in, year out. It was
Pegged,
a very
pinned
steady, constant
dollar.
and stable world, as long as the Americans had surpluses. Then when they stopped having surpluses, Richard Nixon blew the whole thing up.
And that makes a lot of sense, because when it was pinned to being pinned to the value of something that you can create a greater or less supply of at your own control, like regulating a dial, is very different from mining for gold.
And he did it for a very simple reason. Once you have deficits, either you go German, in other words, you tighten your belt, you go Austerian, big time, like the Germans would do, or they made us do. Or and Nixon was not prepared to do that to his own people and to his own ruling class, to his own country. Or you boost your deficits if you are the dominant hegemonic power, which is exactly what Nixon did, and you make other people pay for it. So essentially, the American deficit becomes the magnet that magnetizes into the United States both the net exports of the Germans, the Japanese, and the Chinese, and their money, which goes to New York, to Wall Street, to get recycled in the form of government debt, shares, and real estate. But at some point, by the mid 1980s, the Japanese in particular had become so accumulative when it came to all the dollars that they were accumulating in Tokyo as a result of selling so much stuff to the United States, that Reagan said, okay, well, no, I'll put an end to this. I will constrain the trade deficit that the United States has towards Japan. So Reagan convened at the Plaza Hotel in New York City, not far away from where Donald Trump was loitering, international conference.
Loitering.
He brought in the Germans, the French, the British, and so on, but effectively he only needed the Japanese there. This multilateral thing was for show. And essentially, he read the Riot Act to the Japanese. What Reagan said to the Japanese is really very simple. Either you revalue, you increase the value of the yen, so that you make American exports to Japan cheaper and Japanese imports into America dearer, or I'm going to wipe the floor clean with you with huge tariffs. So he did that before he introduced tariffs, and the Japanese effectively caved.
Surrendered.
But of course, Japan was and remains a vassal of the United States. There are 85,000 American troops. Let's not forget in Okinawa, right? The Americans wrote the Japanese constitution, so it's not like China, for that matter. So when people talk about the Mar-a-Lago Accord, they're having this in mind of, Trump getting people together, like Reagan got together in order to offer this deal. I will not tariff you out of existence if you revalue your currency, and we allow, therefore, together for the dollar to be devalued so that the American trade deficit can be reined in. That's the Mar-a-Lago Accord. Well, having said that, I don't think that's what he has in mind. He has something similar, but not the same thing. Firstly, Donald Trump and Riga.
He said a lot just then, and I mean, he said it well, but just to catch up, if you're going to watch it again, the stronger your currency is, right, the more purchasing power it has. So first of all, when you're importing and you're exporting, when a product from a foreign country comes in, then money from your country goes to them. So he's talking about a lot of different dynamics and a lot of money being exchanged for different things. Some products, like starting from the golden age, and then other things being cycled, and then money flowing back in the form of like financial services, like for Wall Street, and then flowing back out again. This is the global interconnectedness of economies for globalization. It's the more connected it becomes, the more complicated it becomes to unpack, and the more difficult it is to distinguish cause from effect. What does he have to say now about Trump? That was a nice history lesson.
Reagan, unlike all the other presidents before him, he loathes the idea of a large room full of foreigners. Germans, Greeks, and British. This multilateral thing gives him a headache. He really is. He's allergic to the idea. He likes one-on-one discussions because that's how you.
Basically, one thing to be aware of is the demand that one country has for foreign products and services affects the value of its currency, which then affects its ability to buy those foreign goods and services. So there's like this cyclical relationship. And when you connect several things and different supply chains and different services, and then you put traders in the middle of it who are speculating on things to artificially inflate or deflate the perceived value of certain things, it all gets very, very difficult to tease out where differences between cause and effect, what's causing what and what is affecting the other.
Divide and rule your opponents. You don't get them to be in the same room, and you don't have to waste hours listening to every single
Divide
one
and
of them
conquer.
rabbiting on their view of the world.
Trump's
And
approach.
he puts his preemptive strike in. So it's not that, unlike Reagan, who said to them, do this or I will give you the tariffs, tariffs that you will never forget. He starts with the tariffs, and then in the one-on-one discussions with each of our leaders.
Divide and conquer. It's 10 o'clock. Shops are going to open soon, so I'm going to have to watch the rest of this later. Save that for later. There we are. Now Yannis is splashed all over my YouTube. What happened to Segura? Where'd he go? I brought my vape pen out just special for that one. Segura, was it Segura on Segura drinking? Why? I think it was called Why People Don't Drink. That's the one. 6 minutes. All right. I don't drink anymore either, so that
I
got
went
my
to this
attention.
daytime house music party in Austin on Saturday. It's called Mushroom Cowboy. So it's
Microdose, the kind of event.
I don't know. I think they're kind of hinting at that, but it's in a coffee. Well, it was outside of a coffee shop off Congress.
Yeah.
So I turn up at 10:30. It started at 10, and the queue is 250 yards long for coffee.
What?
And there must have been 1,500 people there. One guy brought a baguette, was raving with his baguette. There was dogs, pretty sober looking from the outside. Maybe some people smoking weed, but I think this is maybe the beginning of us seeing the end of like hardcore drink culture. If you've looked at how few of Gen Z now drink,
Lad culture.
it's I think
Ladette culture.
maybe 20%.
The interesting thing is like the theories on why, because there's obviously there have to be theories, right? On we don't actually know exactly. Yeah. One of them is that the youth views drinking as like what their parents did, right? So that's like, well, that's
Naturally uncool.
yeah. Like, my fucking lame ass dad drinks. Like I'm not interested. And so that's one thing. The other part of it is that
My dad
this-
didn't drink.
group of
Not
people
like
that are the youth right now
At
are
home,
so
partying.
much more informed on what the negative aspects of drinking and what it can do to you, that they're just like, why would I
Subject
consume this?
myself.
Yeah, to something like that. And that they've found this whole other, when you want to take the edge off, there's a lot more options, and it's also a lot more accepted today than it
Socially
was
accepted.
20 years ago. Like the idea that you could microdose or do edibles or smoke, or I mean. And then there's like all
Or
the
vape.
ketamine and everything is like, I have different things that I do when I want to have a recreational good time. And yeah, but it's undeniable that it's definitely way down.
There's more daily users in the US of weed now than there are of alcohol.
Is that for real?
Overtaken, or at least that was the most recent study that I saw. In the US, there are now more daily or near daily marijuana users than daily or near daily alcohol users.
And that thought was just completely like, if you're a teen right now, you don't understand how preposterous that sounds coming from, like, if you were growing up in the 80s and 90s. Like, you were just like,
I'm going to put some input into this. My thoughts is that's going to blow up people's faces, I think, later, because the big difference between things like smoking weed and drinking, vaping, anything, like the things that are becoming more and more popular now with younger people as drinking has become less and less popular, is that the impacts, the negative impacts of alcohol consumption are immediate. Within like one or two drinks, you're slurring your words. You can't, you after a couple of more drinks, you're like just like out cold. People are live streaming you in a pool of your own vomit on the floor. It's not a good look, you know what I mean? So whereas the dangers and the negative impacts of things like marijuana smoking or microdosing or taking shrooms outside of like having an acute psychotic episode, which some people are prone to, and it will happen on the spot. If it doesn't happen to you first go or first few tries or whatever, then you become this sort of like advocate for alternative forms of recreation, ways of taking the edge off. But there's research coming out that regular marijuana users, for example, and this is not opinion. This is not theories like Tom Segura is saying. This is not a theory that like the theories of why people. This is a scientific fact for why people shouldn't consume it regularly, and that is that it affects your epigenetics. To be fair, anything really affects your epigenetics. Breathing air affects your epigenetics. Comes from the Greek word epi, on top of, and genetics, your genetics. So by living and breathing, nature versus nurture. So if nature is your genetics, epigenetics is like the biological nurture, the biological effect of nurturing. So your genes, we carry all of the gene profiles of both our moms and our dads, and we have some of those set in stone, and there's some other ones that they're like switches. They can switch on and they can switch off based on what you do throughout your life with those genes, right? So marijuana affects the epigenetics of certain things that can be pretty scary. And I was reading an article yesterday about it. One of them is about a gene that affects how your body handles hormone levels. So it can switch on a gene that makes your body produce, or how it balances your hormones. Basically, you get less testosterone, I think, more estrogen and progesterone and those female hormones. Another one is like something to do with cell division. So a gene that affects how rapidly your cells divide. Cell division can be really great if you're like recovering from a sports injury, but it can also be really bad if it's like, you know, a cancer cell and how quick that's mutating. So similar with the hormone thing, I guess, like context is relevant. There are studies that show really high levels of testosterone in people is associated with reckless behavior, risk-taking behavior, and people that have higher levels than average of testosterone tend to live less. I was reading something about that. So, you know, it literally is taking the edge off, but there's too much of a good thing, perhaps. So, who's to say? But either way, the effects of to find out whether this is a good or a bad thing, it will take like, and the most interesting part of that study is that those effects on the epigenetics, they get passed down. The study is showing that then what you do with your genes, the epigenetics switching, then is passed on to your children, which is, you know, big consequences if it's swinging in the wrong direction. What's he saying now?
Those were like the fringe people almost, you know what I mean? Like, yes, it was popular, but it was not like a respectable person really wasn't doing that. You know, it was like the arts, it was like hippies and
all fun and games.
I mean, people thought of it as like the absolute worst thing
vibes
that could happen. I mean, people from like my dad's generation likened marijuana to heroin. They didn't even see like really a difference. They're just like, you're a junkie. It's like, but what, for smoking a joint?
Yeah.
And like, yeah, that's the way they viewed it. So the fact that it's that accepted now, it's mind blowing to me.
I wonder if
swung to the other extreme.
That drinking in the house on your own feels pretty fucking bad.
Yeah.
But smoking in the house on your own, you're like, I'm playing Call of Duty.
Yeah.
Leave me alone. But if you're 6 beers deep playing Call of Duty,
yeah,
it's a different story.
Yeah, and you're not playing well at that. You're just like,
I don't know how well people are playing on weed either, but
fuck.
Yeah,
you're probably more likely to yell out pejorative slurs. I think that I mean, look, smoking is still not good for you. So like, you're probably, but we've discovered that, you know, there's other ways to ingest and like consume, and that's what I think is part of like this youth culture thing about staying away from drinking is they're like, whatever, I do droplets in this, or I have my gummy or whatever, however they want to consume. But they're definitely not drinking, man. They're not drinking like everybody else before them did.
Not
I
a good
used to run
look.
nightclubs for ages, and one of the big downturns we've seen has been in nightlife industry. I think the UK is losing a nightclub a week.
Yes.
Not like an unlimited number of nightclubs. It's like one is shutting down pretty much every single week. And I asked a friend who's still in the industry why he thought that was the case. He said, smartphones, man. Back in the day, you could be as loose as you wanted. You could sort of have that Larry, louty, drinking spirit, at least in...
What happened in the club stayed in the club.
Of
right?
course.
Yeah.
Like if you mess up and like shit yourself in the middle of a nightclub in 2002, it's a story that you can deny the next day.
Yeah.
And then after 6 months, most people have probably forgotten.
Yeah.
Whereas if that happens in 2025, that's now concretized on the internet for everybody to know and bring back up and make memes out of for the rest of time.
I mean, it's
Not only could you deny it in 2002, but that also, like, I didn't know that this guy, I know this guy, but I didn't know that he was a nightclub owner. You could deny what happened the night before, and that would feed into the next weekend, because it'd be like, well, you don't know, you weren't there. What really happened if Tiffany kissed Joe or did whatever in the bathroom, and then whoever wasn't there and didn't know was like, oh, I want to know, I want to go. So then, like, there was, it worked in the completely opposite direction. Now smartphones, there you go, you did, and it was ugly.
But can you imagine like how the pro
I don't want to be
athletes
part of that. No, I'd
of
rather
the
go to
80s and 90s and
coffee
early
shop.
2000s would just
dispensary.
go out and just destroy a woman's hopes and dreams. And then now they're like, everyone's
On edge.
Yeah, everyone's
What's
got
funny
a
about that?
phone out. It's just, yeah.
We'll get back to talking to Tom in 1 minute, but first I need to tell you about Nomadic. Traveling should be about the journey, not, see that one hand, the chaos of packing, which is why I partnered with Nomadic. Their travel pack, this 14-litre, is this the 14? This is the 14-litre travel pack. This is the biggest
What a
life
plug.
changer from a luggage perspective that I've ever had. It's what I use every
sponsors
single
for
day.
today.
And it makes traveling genuinely so much more enjoyable. They've got compartments for everything. Your laptop, your shoes, your sunglasses. The bag is so clean, you half expect...
Blah, blah. There you go. Mail coffee, militaryshop.lv. It's a real. All right, that'll do. Cheers, my dears. Just out of curiosity, let's see what the homepage says now. Dun dun dun. Oh, we're back to the UFC. Why men are walking away from women? Walking alone. I walk a lonely road. Is that Johnny Depp? Wow. I thought it was Bam Margera. All right, cheers.